Today, let's talk about color work. First, we're going to talk about supplies. You'll need a tapestry needle, some scissors. I have these wonderful bobbins on my website. You'll definitely want to grab some of these. I think it makes it so much easier and less tangles. They're really cute and they are free as a printable at brianakdesigns.com, and they help you trap the yarn as you're working and hold the yarn on the back of your work. I absolutely love these. If you have a Cricut or Silhouette, they cut out really quick, or you can cut them by hand. You'll also need some small amounts of yarn. Today I'm going with a worsted weight Brava from We Crochet. I know that this is an acrylic. I chose an acrylic because I will be using these for warm drinks, so that's why it's a mug rug, so more like your hot cocos and coffees that don't have condensation. But if you do want to make these for a drink that might have some moisture, feel free to substitute with a worsted weight cotton. I will also be doing these designs that you can find on my blog. These are super fun, pretty quick, small projects. They work great as gifts or for your own home around the holidays. Each one of these is going to use a different technique so that we can talk about the different ways to color work. So let's get started. Now today I have chosen to work with the Furls Streamline in Cafe. It is a size G 4mm crochet hook, and I absolutely love the Furls Streamline hooks. I love the swirls on them, and this one obviously is aptly named because this reminds me of coffee. So to get started, I want you to load some bobbins. If you want to work this way, you can work from balls of yarn, but it does get a little bit tricky and some tangles, so I highly recommend loading up some bobbins. For now, I'm starting with 2 red and 1 white. We'll be adding to those a little bit later as we go. You'll also want to print your chart. We're going to start with the Intarsia design. Now with this design, it is reversible because we'll be working in blocks, and I'll show you what I mean in a minute. But on any of our charts today, we don't have any words. But if we did have words, I wanted to note that for the left-hand crocheters, instead of starting at the bottom right of the chart, you would start at the bottom left. Essentially what that does is it mirrors the chart so that when you are finished, your wording isn't backwards, because that's what happens for left-hand crocheters when they are doing any type of color work, when there are words written. So you'll want to start from the left-hand side of the chart and work in basically it flips and mirrors that chart for you so that you have the correct wording when you're done. But for today, start by chaining 28 stitches. So I've got 28 chains here, and I'm going to single crochet in the second chain from the hook and in every single stitch after that. So at the end of row 1, we will have 27 stitches in color A, which today my color A is red. Feel free to substitute and mix up the colors. So this is row 1. It is simply a solid row of color A. Now that we have our 27 single crochet stitches for row 1, we will turn our work. There is no need to chain 1 when you are working in rows. This is a trick I learned, but if you would like to, feel free. You can always mark your first stitch, but I am not chaining 1 at the beginning of my row because it's actually not necessary, and the sides are a little bit less bulky if you omit that chain 1. I'm going to single crochet into the first 12 stitches because the first 12 stitches in this row are red or color A. All right, so here's my 12th stitch. I'm going to stop before I complete the stitch, leaving the 2 loops on the hook, because this is the point where we will change colors. To finish out the 12th stitch, we're going to actually finish it with our new color. This is how I will change colors in every single style of color work, whether it's Fair Isle, Tapestry, or Intarsia. So I will simply finish this last yarn over in the new color and pull through those 2 loops on the hook. What that does is it gives us the ability to start our next stitch with our new color. And as you notice, it doesn't really show up in that last stitch we worked. So now we want to single crochet the next 3 stitches in our color B. So I will do 1, 2, And on our third stitch, because I know I'm changing colors here, I once again will stop short of completing that single crochet and I will join my new color. Now here's where I want to show you that these bobbins really come in handy. We're not using this yarn over here because we don't want to carry it on the back. We want this to be reversible. So I will simply wind up this bobbin and leave it be. And by winding it up, it's less likely to get tangled. And I go ahead and I slide this strand underneath that little sheep head, and then it just stays there. I can go ahead and do the same with my color B because I'm not going to be using it for the rest of the row, and I can lock that in place. So now these can dangle, but they're not going to get as twisted and tangled as if you were working with lots of balls of yarn. Now I'm going to grab my other bobbin with my color A, and I am going to join this for my next stitch. I kind of pull down my strand B so that it's a nice stitch, and then I continue going on, and I will single crochet into the last 12 in color B. Now that I've completed that row, I'm going to turn my work, and this is also where the bobbins come in handy. It's much easier to turn small amounts of yarn versus a ton of balls of yarn. That's where it tends to get tangly. And now I'm going to work my row 3. Now for row 3, working back this way, I will single crochet in the first 11 in my color A. All right, now that I've come to my 11th stitch, I'm going to stop so that I can change colors. And then I'm going to be using this center color B bobbin. I'll just undo it. I can go ahead and lock this bobbin in place so that it doesn't get tangled anywhere. And I'm going to bring this yarn over, and I'm going to pull it through those 2 loops on the hook, and now I'm ready to work my next stitch. Now notice there's a big long carry line right here. Because I'm going to be working in this color, I can simply single crochet over it to hide it. And then I will single crochet into the next 4. So there's a total of 5 stitches with color B. And do you see how nice those color changes look here? We've got no carrying on either side. It's completely reversible. And now that I've come to the point where I'm going to change colors again, I can go ahead and lock the color B in place. I can pick up this other bobbin of color A, and I am going to pull it through the last 2 loops on the hook to complete that stitch. And now I am ready to carry on. Now when you are changing colors, a lot of times you will have this vertical strand as I just changed colors and we moved a stitch over, and that's okay. It's really not noticeable. As you notice, the color work works really nicely in Intarsia, and I'm going to single crochet into the rest of the stitches of the row with color A. Now I'll turn my work, and for row 4, it's simply a repeat of row 3 where I'm going to single crochet into the first 11. And now I'm going to stop on that 11th stitch before completing the single crochet, and I'm going to yarn over with my color B and complete that 11th stitch. And now I will do 5 stitches again with the color A. And now I'm going to switch colors again and go back to the color B. And that is the end of row 4. As you can see, we've got our bobbins hanging out, and it's working up really nicely. We've got this block of color in between the 2 blocks of red. I'm going to let you continue to work this on your own up until row 11. So work through row 10. It's doing a lot of this type of color work, and we're just doing, the color A on each side of that color B, and then come back for row 11. Now I'm bringing you back 1 row early, actually on row 10, because there's something I wanted to briefly talk about and show you. First off, I have weaved in my ends because the extra strands sometimes drive me crazy. So feel free to either weave them in now or you can later. I've also wanted to let you know I have run out of color on a bobbin. This will happen quite often since bobbins don't hold as much yarn, but I still find it easier to work with the bobbins and weave in the ends and reload the bobbins and keep on going. Now for row 10, we are expanding the white, the color B, a little bit by 2 stitches on each side. So if I were to do this, the easiest way I think to do it, instead of, you can cut this strand and then rejoin over here where it's 2 stitches over. That's exactly how Intarsia should be done. However, I find that I do want to cut down on as many strands as I can to weave in. So for these remaining 2 stitches, and that's these 2 stitches right here, instead of cutting my yarn, I'm going to single crochet over them, which is a tapestry style of work. So sometimes I kind of combine the styles together for the best benefits. So I will actually bring color A up and insert my hook, and I'm going to start working over that for 2 stitches. So it's simply going to sit on my work, and I'm going to complete these 2 stitches in the color B while also working over this strand for 2 stitches. And that way I don't have to cut the yarn and restart. And now it's time for me to go to the color A and complete the rest of the stitches in this row. So now for row 11. Now, if you notice on this row, we are changing colors quite often. I'm going to level with you here, and if I were doing this for myself and not teaching a video about Intarsia, I would absolutely finish this in a tapestry style. So feel free to do so, but for this video, I want to show you how to do true Intarsia. So that's why I'm going to have so many bobbins going here, and you can see how it goes. The reason why I want to show you this is you may come across in Intarsia color work that there is a lot of color changes and you have a lot of bobbins. That happens. That also means a lot of ends to weave in, and that's just the nature of color work. It does take a little bit extra work for those beautiful pieces. So we're going to get started with row 11. And I will be working this way across, and I am going to single crochet the first 7 with color A. Now, right before I change colors, I'm going to go ahead and lock this. So when we're using a lot of bobbins, that's why I like using these bobbins, is it is important to lock that yarn into place for less yarn tangles. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use my very next color, this color, to do the next 3 stitches in color B. So I'm going to pull through the last 2 of the last stitch to start that color change. And now I'm going to single crochet in the next 1, 2, 3, but I'm going to stop again because I do want to change colors. And we are going to go to a color A. So this is where we would bring in, yes, a new bobbin. Now I'm going to complete this 1 stitch in color A, stopping right here. So we didn't work with this bobbin for very long, and I'm going to go ahead and lock some bobbins in place here because I really don't want to get tangled. And now, yes, we are going to bring in another bobbin because we are changing colors. So now I'm going to bring in this bobbin, and we are going to do 1 single crochet with color B. And stop there. And now once again, I'm switching colors again. So I will lock this bobbin into place. And I'm going to bring in another bobbin for the next 3 stitches. And as you guessed it, I'm going to keep bringing in a lot of these bobbins for this row every single time that I change colors. So here we go. I'm now on 1 stitch for color B. Now we'll switch again and do 1 stitch for color A. Lock that one back in place. And I have 3 stitches for color B. So I'm bringing in another bobbin yet again. As you can see, there are so many bobbins across this row. If you've ever seen people doing color work online where they have a ton of bobbins, this is why they are working in that Intarsia method. And now I have the rest of the row in my color A. So I'm going to lock this color in place and I'm going to bring in my last bobbin for this row. All right, so as you can see, we have this is looking great, but we have a lot of things going on behind here. We have a lot of ends to weave in. We have a lot of bobbins going on. It does kind of look like a little bit of a mess, but this is how Intarsia is worked. So if you need to do Intarsia, this is the method you continue to work in. Like I said, I might just continue to do this rest and Fair Isle, but I want to show you how to do it in Intarsia so you understand the method. So for row 12, I would turn my work. This is also why I love having the bobbins. If all these ends drive you crazy, you can weave them in now and it gets rid of half that mess back there. And for row 12, we are going to be working back this way and I will single crochet into the first 7 stitches. Now it's time to change colors. I do try to keep all my bobbins on the same side of my work. If you don't, if you mess up and you've got some bobbins on the front and the back, honestly for Intarsia, you're totally fine. It's okay, but try if you can to keep your bobbins on one side of your work. Now that we have completed row 12, if we're looking at row 13, we can see that we aren't going to need these bobbins. We're just going to simply need to crochet our first stitches in this row in color A. So what we can do is we can actually fasten them off. And this is why there are a lot of ends to weave in with Intarsia. But this bobbin here, I'm done with it. So I can go ahead and leave a tail end to weave in later and fasten that off. This bobbin here, I'm done with it. I don't need it for this next row, so I can go ahead and do the same. And we're actually going to be able to get rid of some other bobbins here. So let's start so I can show you what happens next. So for row 13, I'm going to be single crocheting into the first 10 stitches. Now after working the first 10 stitches, you'll notice that we didn't pick up. We had a bobbin for this color A area here, but we didn't need to use it. So it's still just sitting here. We can go ahead and for now we can fasten that off. So a lot of times with Fair Isle, it's like you're starting and stopping a lot of different colors and you can fasten off when you're done with that color in that section so that you can get rid of a bobbin off the back. And now we will turn and keep working in the same way for the rest of this pattern. And notice when we come back to row 16, we'll be adding some bobbins, yes, for 1 stitch if we are truly working this in Intarsia and then fastening off and going to the next row. So it's all worked in the same way. So complete those rows working in the Intarsia method, or if you prefer, you can also finish this off in Fair Isle if you just don't want to work in Intarsia, and that's totally fine too, or I mean in Tapestry. But next we're going to get to Tapestry so that I can show you how to do that as well. Now Intarsia can look completely messy until all of the ends are weaved in. It is so gratifying to weave in all of the ends. You'll be left with a pile of tail ends. You can always use those for stuffing for Ami later. But it is a lot of work to do Tapestry just because of weaving in those ends. However, the results give us a completely reversible design, which has a nice gratifying ending. Now let's talk about other ways to color work. What we will be working on next is called Tapestry. You can simply work from your skeins of yarn for this because we're only going to be using 2 colors. Tapestry can be done in more than 2 colors, but usually no more than 3. I rarely have seen it in 4, and the reason being is because we are trapping yarn inside of our stitches as we go. To get started, it will be very similar to our last one, where we are going to chain 28 and single crochet from the second hook and across to have 27 single crochet stitches. And we will be starting with color A, which for this I have chosen to be green. Now that I come to the end of row 1, I'm on my 27th stitch, and for the next row working back, it is a solid row as well of color B. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to switch colors on the last stitch of row 1 using that color change method, where I yarn over and pull through the last 2 loops to complete that 27th stitch, but now I'm ready to work into my next color. I'll turn. There's no need to chain 1. It's not actually necessary, and it's a less bulky edge if we omit it. So I'm simply going to start by single crocheting into that first stitch and in each stitch across. Now that I am at the end of row 2, I've stopped short of completing that last stitch because I know the next row is going to start with color A. So I'll want to finish out this stitch with color A so that I'm ready to work the first stitch of the next row in color A. But as we notice, my color A is still attached over here on the other side, so we will need to go ahead and fasten off and move that over. So now I will finish the 27th stitch in row 2 with color A, and now I'm ready to work in color A for row 3. So I will turn, and for row 3 I am going to start to show you a little bit of what it means to work in Tapestry. So I will do my first stitch with color A. However, I will now be working both strands of yarns across the entire row. So I'm going to pull my color B to the back of my work, and as I work the first stitch in this row, I will also be working around my color A. So you simply kind of lay it on top of your stitches and you work around and over it so that it traps it inside of this stitch. However, we're also going to back up again. I just wanted to show you how we will be doing that. I will also be switching yarn. So I've started my color A stitch, but I'm going to switch to my color B to complete that color A. But same thing for the next 3 stitches, I'll be working color B. So I'll be working the tapestry method where whatever yarn I'm not currently working with, I will lay it across the top of my stitches and I will work around and over it, trapping it inside. Now I'm ready to switch back to my color A. So I will simply bring up that color and finish that stitch. Go ahead and do that next stitch, working around and over. But I will want to bring that color through this stitch before I complete it. And now I'm going to work 3 again in color B, trapping the color A inside my stitches. Now we'll switch colors. And then switch back to color B. And I'll be working 4 in color B while also trapping that color A and working over it. Sometimes when I'm working over it, we don't want it to be too loose. I'll show you what I mean, because sometimes it's hard to hold the tension on the color of strand of yarn you're not using. So sometimes when I get to the end of working a lot, you can see it's kind of like puffing through on the back. I don't want that. So it's okay to give it a nice little tug so that it doesn't bubble out the back. Now I'm ready to switch to color A for 1 stitch. And then I'm going to go back to color. Oh, I didn't, yep, I did switch. Then I'm going to go back to color B for 4 stitches. Now before I switch colors here, I'm going to give it a little bit of a tug so that we don't have anything puffing out the back. And I'm going to switch to my color A for one stitch. Then I'm going to switch back to color B for 3 stitches. Can already tell just because I'm not holding color A at all, I've got some bubbling on the back, so simply pull that out before I switch the colors. And now back to color B for 3 stitches. And the last stitch in the row will be with color A. And I will still work over color B. And I know for the next row I will be going back to color B, so I will finish this last stitch with the color B. Now here is how tapestry looks. It is reversible. The stitches can be on both sides. And for some tapestry, people will cut the yarn at the end of each row and begin the next row and have a lot of fringe on the sides. That's one way to do it. That is a lot of fun. It's a great way to add some fringe. For this, since I'll be doing a different style of fringe on the edges, I'm simply going to carry my yarn up the side. So now for row 4, we will be carrying our color A for quite some time before we use it, but we just keep working into that tapestry method where we will be carrying each yarn across our entire work and working over it. So both strands of yarn will come with us for each row. Now I've worked ahead a few rows just so you can kind of see how this is coming out. It's the same method for every single row throughout this entire pattern where we are going to be working in the tapestry style. So you'll just be switching in between yarns while also carrying the other yarn that you're not currently using. So it's the same thing throughout every single row. So just keep on working each row using the tapestry method of changing colors and simply working around and over the color that you are carrying across and not using at that time. And then you just keep switching back and forth between colors. So that's all there is to it to tapestry. I'm going to work this up so you can see the end result. But tapestry is also reversible. The difference we see in tapestry from Intarsia is that in Intarsia we didn't carry our yarn in between here. It was blocks of color. And you can kind of see the color that's being carried through peeking through a little bit, but it's still a nice effect. So keep working this up in the tapestry method. And here we have finished working this cute tree mug rug in the tapestry style. So this is reversible. Each side can be seen as really, really cute. And it's really fun to work this way. Just note that sometimes this might change your row gauge since you're crocheting over some yarn. It can make your row gauge a little bit higher, but this is how you work in tapestry. Now I want to talk about how to do Fair Isle, which is another way to do color work. And this way is not reversible. Fair Isle is most commonly done in the round because things that we do in the round, we don't ever really look at the wrong side of our work. But it can also be done flat. And for something like this, where it's a mug rug that faces down, it doesn't have to be reversible. So it's okay for us to learn this method flat as well. And it works the same flat or in the round. There is a right side to your work and a wrong side to your work. I've gone ahead and I have done my first row where I chained 28 and single crocheted in the second chain from the hook and across for 27 total single crochet stitches. And I have stopped short on my last stitch because I know I need to change colors right here to start my next row. Now Fair Isle is commonly only changing colors between every 3 to 5 stitches or so. I purposefully added some areas of a long running of color so I can show you how to continue to carry your yarn if it goes beyond 3 to 5 stitches. So we're going to start off by learning that right on our second row. I am going to say that all of the odd rows are the right side of the work and the even rows are the wrong side of the work. And it is important to keep track of that because we always want to be carrying our work, our yarn, on the wrong side. So I'm going to turn, and starting on row 2, the wrong side is going to be facing us, which means we want to keep all of our strands of yarn that we're carrying along the back, the wrong side, hidden on that side. So I will start by single crocheting in the first 2 stitches. I'm not going to worry about the edges here. I'm just going to carry my yarn up along the edges every single time we go to a new row. And now after the second stitch, it is time for me to change colors. Now notice this isn't tapestry. I have not crocheted over my second color. My second color is back over here hanging out. I'm going to pull my yarn, my working yarn, towards me because this is the wrong side facing. And I'm going to bring up color A, yarn over, and pull through those last 2 loops on the hook. And now it's time for me to work color A for 1 stitch. So I'm going to work color A. And now I'm going to bring this yarn to the front of my work towards me and drop it. And then I'm going to pick up my color B because I want to finish this stitch in the color I'm changing to. And now I'm going to work color B for a lot of stitches across. But since Fair Isle is carrying your yarn on the back and we don't want to carry it for the entire row, we're going to do what's called catching the yarn. So every few stitches, I will bring up my color A, simply placing it across my work, and I'm going to work around it, trying to keep it as much on the wrong side of my work as possible, and catch it. So we haven't used it for a stitch at all. We're simply going to carry it across as we work our color B and catch it every few stitches because you don't want to carry yarn for more than 3 to 5 stitches at a time. So once again, I'll bring up my color B and catch it. And see how that's carrying this yarn across, but it's not actually using any stitches on the right side. So continue to do that until we get to the last 3 stitches in the row. Now for the last 3 stitches, I will once again bring my yarn towards me on the wrong side, join my new color through that last stitch. I'm going to do 1 stitch in color A, bring the yarn towards me when we're working on the wrong side of the work. And then the last 2 stitches will be in color B. And then we will turn. For this, once again, I am not chaining 1 on each side of our work. It just adds some bulk and is not exactly necessary. Now for row 3, this is where we're going to start changing yarn quite often. Our first stitch will be in our color B, and our second stitch will be in our color A. So the nice thing about when we are working with carrying the yarn on the back is you can simply drop and pick up the yarn as you go, especially where this row has no more than three stitches of one color before we change to the next color. So you're just simply, we're just simply working from color to color, dropping the color, picking up the new color. And as we do this, it simply carries the yarn along the back of our work. We're keeping our yarn on the back of our work. So as I pick up the new color, I'm going to show you the back, it's just carrying that yarn along. We don't want it to be too tight. We want our floating or carrying yarn along the back to not affect the gauge or the sizing of this. We want it to carry quite loosely, but not so loose that it looks a little bit sloppy. Now I've skipped ahead a couple rows just so you can kind of get to see a little bit more of how this is working up. I will say I do find that Fair Isle does tend to look a little bit better in the round, but like I said, it also does work in rows, and there is a wrong side and right side. So I want to show you what the wrong side looks like. So you can see it will look messy. It has a lot of carried yarn, But that's okay, because when we're choosing to use Fair Isle, we are not going to be using or looking at our wrong side. It's only for pieces that we're only looking at one side of the piece. Another tip is once you get really comfortable with color work, you can start to do this. You'll load your yarn, carrying both the yarns into your left hand or your right hand, just depending on if you're a left hand crocheter or a right hand crocheter. And you can switch back and forth between yarns as needed. I do find that Fair Isle is really fast to work compared to the other colorwork styles, simply because you can do this, which is a really cool way to do color work, and it goes a lot faster since we don't have to drop and pick up our yarn. But until you get comfortable doing color work, because this is a challenge, it takes a bit of practice, you will need to drop and pick up your yarn, which isn't too bad. It's just all about skill level and practice. The only way you get better is through practice. It also only tends to work on the right side. I have a harder time doing that method on the wrong side and keeping my carried yarn on the front when I turn. I'll show you. So continue to work in this Fair Isle method all the way across each row, keeping the wrong side and the right side. This is the right side, this is the wrong side in that Fair Isle method. So here's how our Fair Isle mug rug has worked up. Now notice in Fair Isle, when you're working back and forth in rows, a lot of times your stitches may not match up colorwork wise as well as they will when you are working in the round. But the point of this project is to show you how to do Fair Isle and work it in rows for this mug rug, and to show you how the back will look. The back will have all of your carried yarn. So once again, this is not reversible. This does have a wrong side and a right side when working the Fair Isle stitch.